Hola, la, another day, another Humpday Q&A. So
Yeah.
I was just saying before we started, it's National Humpday here, I think, in the UK. So yeah, that's something special for us to celebrate, I guess. I don't know what we did, the normal stream, I guess.
I thought it was Wednesday every week.
It is Wednesday.
Across the whole, across the whole world.
52 Wednesdays in the year.
Huh. I almost forgot to close Discord. Hot tip for anyone who does live streaming. Discord alerts will come through your microphone even if you quit Discord until you actually close it.
That's a magical way of dealing with that. I think it's the way games do it. I think games do that kind of weird thing. Anyway, right. So we have some people joining us today. We have a Randall in the background. Randall, do you want to come on screen? There we go.
Might as well. Yeah. Hi. Hi, everybody.
We're gonna take us through the beginning bits here. There's definitely a lot of sound coming off your new microphone, Randall. So maybe mute when you're not talking.
Yeah, there's folks. If we're having leveling issues, let us know. If one of us is much louder than the others.
Well, this is using my Yeti now again, just like the old school.
So maybe
there's a lot of noise. It's background noise.
It just sounds like the gain's too high. There's a lot of high.
Yeah, that would.
Anyway,
if it's clipping, okay.
Anyway, right, we'll let you deal with that. In the meantime, we're going to go through the beginning bit. Welcome to today's stream, where we have a special one, SuperDeclarative, Matt Carroll. He'll be joining us in a little bit. In fact, 1 hour into the show, so we normally do a 2 hour show. This will be 1 hour in. Matt's going to join us. In the meantime, the do's and don'ts. Scott.
Do's and don'ts. Well, first of all, be respectful, be constructive. I don't care if it's YouTube, it's not Reddit. We have standards. Don't post anything that is adult, rude, offensive statements. Don't advertise or promote your business. Don't keep posting your same question over and over again. We keep a list, just like Santa Claus, and the question goes to the bottom the more times it's repeated. Harassment of any kind is not tolerated. Failing that, you will be blocked from here, and we will tell everybody that you got blocked from here, which means you'll get blocked from there. That includes places like the Flutter community Slack that has 20,000 members who could answer your questions if you don't get thrown out.
Right.
Simon?
I think we've done this a little bit backwards today. So, we'll introduce ourselves. I mean, we do this every stream for those people that are new here. My name's Simon Lightfoot. I'm a Flutter community leader, and I am the CTO of DevAngels London. And you can follow me on Twitter at DevAngels London. Scott.
I am Scott Stahl. I am also a community leader. I am a GDG organizer for GDG Cleveland, and it's rumored that I develop Flutter apps for a living.
And we have we've finally updated the slides, so Randall can tell us. Randall, what is this?
Randall, muted. Actually, my fault. I muted Randall while he was fixing his mic.
Oh, you have to unmute. You have to unmute and stream, Randall. There we go.
There you go.
Hear you now.
Okay, right, great, good. Yeah, I said I'm finally somebody. I'm actually on the slide.
Wow. You are super loud.
I've turned on auto gain because you said it would be better. So
it sounds like auto gain was on. This is way too high now. Well, I'm gonna mute you just for a minute, and while we're having those technical difficulties, I'll introduce Randall.
I'll tell you what. We're gonna do a Randall imitation.
No, we're not. I couldn't possibly do that. Randall's thoughts. So Randall's been around from the very beginning. It started as a web GDE because there was no Dart GDE specifically, now a Dart Flutter GDE. And he's our question magician. So behind the scenes, he'll be looking at your questions. And you need to make sure that your questions have a letter Q in front of them in the chat so we can go find them and add them to our question list.
Yep. And every time he sees your question for the first time, it goes on the list. Every time he sees it for the second, third, or fourth, it gets moved to the bottom of the list.
And as I said, now into the show, Matt Carroll will be joining us. He's a former Flutter team member, and he started up his business, SuperDeclarative. And you can also get him on that Twitter address without the E, so SuperDeclarative. Anyway, back to here. Randall, how you doing? Shall we see? Is that better?
Well, okay. I turned my gain down on there. Maybe you had it cranked up. Is it better?
It sounds a little bit better. It kind of gone back to how it was originally. So it still sounds a bit too high, but we can put up with it for today.
I put automatically adjust mic volume is on now. It was off for a little while, but it was set way too high, so I could crank it back down.
I don't know. Let's carry on and see how we go. So,
Okay.
so as I was saying, the first half of this stream is going to be the general Q&A. So get your questions in the chat right now. The more you get in the chat, the better it's going to be for everyone, so we can get going. We were talking about so we are going to be talking about Flutter processing. So that when Matt joins us, so I don't know if anyone knows, but there's a language, I guess you can call it a language. It's called processing. It's a framework for essentially manipulating graphics, so doing some sort of fancy animated interactive charts. It's kind of like half game engine, half UI system. It's a thing of its own, somewhere in between quite a few things. But it's very much I don't know if anyone's played around with Arduinos, but it's very much the Arduino of like game engines. It's kind of like you can open up the IDE, you can just smack in a few lines, hit go, and it just runs. There's no compiling, there's no tooling, it's just like, bam, you're done. It's really super simple. You can do some really interesting things with it. So if you haven't seen that, go look up processing. The official website is processing.org. Processing is a flexible software sketchbook with a language for learning and how to code within the context of visual arts. That probably explained it a lot better than I could originally. So yeah, well, I'm hoping that so we'll talk about this more when Matt arrives. But the idea is that of porting processing to Flutter and using Flutter's rendering system to essentially perform the same logic as processing, but the output goes through Flutter. It means you can work on all the platforms that Flutter works on. It's quite interesting stuff. Let me see if I can share this tab. Let's see if this works. Think. There we go. So yeah, this is again. Any Flutter questions? Any questions at all? Drop them in the chat. It doesn't have to be related to processing. Although, please, if you have any questions whilst we're talking about this, line them up in the chat with the queue, and then we can get them answered. And I think we'll probably answer them when Matt arrives. So yeah, there's you can see here these kind of fun things. I have no idea what I'm looking at here. Loading images, and there's a good example. Look, so this is it. Like image, you have one setup function that runs once. Tell it what size, what image to load, and then draw. It says no loop, which means I guess don't continue drawing, just draw it once. And then draw, set the background to 0, and draw the image 5 times over, and that's what you get. So you know it's very more examples. I wonder if we can see some perspective. There's some really interesting things, and especially if you're trying to do like interactive graphs or that kind of stuff. You know, you can really come up with some really interesting things. There you go. There's it running in the browser. So it keeps drawing random circles. And then the code for that is just that. Super simple. Set up function, bam, draw, bam, and you're done. And it'll continue calling the draw function in a loop, basically. So, but there's definitely I mean, even this, you know, like the amount of things you can actually do, which is I really try and look for those like really fabulous ones that are animated.
And while Simon's doing that, yes, I actually do run Cherry MX Blue switches, as you can hear.
You can't hear them.
You actually couldn't hear that typing. You're kidding me.
Nope.
Wow. And Daryl and Tomic, I have a link waiting for that about the Dart VM. We will get
here
to
you go. Game of Life. There you go. We all know that one. Well, hopefully you know this one. If you don't know Game of Life, go look it up. Must read for all developers.
Simon has his priorities. Usually zombies.
So yeah, that is the full thing. I mean, it's quite funny when you think about these things, right? As a modern developer, you look at this and go, oh, I need to make an object for each one of these dots. I need to make like a grid. I need to make a management system. There needs to be some messaging in between them or something like this, right? Like you kind of like over-engineer it completely. And you got to think that this is probably right. I think this was ran on the PDP 10 or something. Like it was, it's like completely like, yeah, overkill what we do now. And like you see this in a few simple lines, some simple loops of logic here, and you're done, you know. Anyway, I digress, but you know, as usual, I was hoping for some. Well, that's cool. Edge detection. Well, actually sets up a kernel and runs a kernel over the image, sampling the pixels. So much you could learn from this, like so much you can do. So it's really, really interesting stuff. Smoke particle system. There you go. Oh, cool. We'll change the wind. But yeah. Anyway. So yeah, we're hopefully if anyone wants to take a look before we're joined by Matt, sorry, there is where is it? This is the package, I believe, Flutter Processing.
And we have a couple of questions.
Start them off. Yeah, that's
we have to write platform-specific code if we're adding Bluetooth-related modules. Now, let's start out with the simple, which you probably already know about, but I do want to just start with the basics. And that is on pub.dev, there are a few Bluetooth packages, but you have to be very careful. Look in the upper right there. I had to resort by recently updated. Otherwise, you get a bunch of stuff on top that's 2 years old.
I'll be honest with you, that actually is still good. So these are just the ones that are in active development, but the Bluetooth stack doesn't change that often. If you change it back to what it was before, like most popular or whatever, no, that's way too old. You search Bluetooth, you know that, right?
Whoops.
If you search, yeah.
I never make any typos, and anyone who knows me can tell you that. Yes, I never have typos.
Right.
Nope.
But if you scroll down, there's a really interesting one by so I don't know if people know there's a product called Philips Hue. They do the light bulbs that you can change over Bluetooth and all this, and they actually have a package, and their app is made in Flutter. So they actually made a Bluetooth package called, I think it's Bluetooth Reactive or something like that. Yeah, Reactability, that's the one. Whoa. The one at the top. There we go. So that is made by meethue.com, which is Philips Hue. And this has quite a lot of support for Bluetooth Low Energy. But there's several libraries.
Sorry, hasn't been very long since it's been updated.
Well, it depends on what is very odd. But
4 months.
Yeah. Anyway, so in short, you don't have to. I'll get rid of that banner. In short, you don't have to actually write your own plugin, right? Like there's plenty of Bluetooth plugins on pub.dev that you can use. They all have their pros and cons. Go find the one that meets your requirements and does what you want.
And that's just where I wanted to start. Now, the other question is, do you have to write platform-specific code when adding a Bluetooth module or Bluetooth-related module? So what if they're adding their own?
Was it as in what? Sorry, I'm not following that at all. So yeah, but what does he mean by module? Does he mean like, so when you come from Android, a module is like a part of your app, right? But there's also, like, if you have a custom Bluetooth device, then if it's running low energy protocol, you can still use the Philips Hue one. You just put in the UUID and the scan, was it the 16-bit ID for your device, and it will tell you when it's found and do all the normal stuff. There's no magic there. So it should be straightforward. It all depends on the type of device, because obviously if you're trying to do like Bluetooth audio, then you need to have a library specific for handling and doing the audio and doing the microphone on the native platform and whatever else you're trying to do.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Probably not.
Go then. Next.
Are there any docs or tutorials about the Dart VM? Yes. So
what's this? Sorry.
this right here is from Vyacheslav Erorov, and a well-known name in Dart.
But
I will put this in the.
I think I would say, what does he mean by the Dart VM first of all? Because there's plenty of stuff about the Dart language, and the Dart, and is he just trying to understand how the Dart VM works? Oh, does describe that. Yeah.
Yes.
This might be a bit old now.
It possibly is, but I'm not sure the VM will have changed that much. So let's see here.
There is no VM as such now. So
it's one of the first things he talks about, though, is that it's not. What was it?
It's complicated. That's what it is.
Yes, very.
Yeah. Anyway, can you pop the URL in the chat and then people look at that?
Yeah. In a sense that
there's also obviously the standard sites, Dart.dev, for example, right? And they have a language guide as well, a language tour that you can see as well. So it's all there. I mean, yeah.
And just in
the
case
the Dart.dev site actually has some really interesting documentation, as we showed the other week, the stuff on concurrency. There's several good pages around how the system works.
And in case people are watching later, here we go. Because I don't think they have access to the chat.
Yeah, it does. It replays the chat. I got it recorded. So,
and it always works.
It does. You can't turn it off anymore. It will always record.
Oh, really?
Sometimes. Yep.
Well, that's scary. Oh. 2 people driving, fighting over the wheel.
Come on.
Let's see what's next. Might be off topic. No, we never go off topic. But I would like to know, why is the winner announcement given a gap of 15 days when the judgment has already ended today? I am assuming you're talking about and I want to be specific
puzzle
here,
hack.
The Flutter Team's puzzle hack, which is not Flutter Community's puzzle hack. There are 0 Google employees on this screen right now. So we don't know any more than you do.
It's not. I mean, you could obviously take an educated guess. They had to do stuff within 15 days, so they've had to delay it by 15 days. I mean, does it matter? They announced the winner at this time.
Will there be a Flutter event at I/O 2022? I hope so. Oh, Randall's nodding. Does Randall have inside GDE knowledge that he's not supposed to be telling us? No.
There'll always be Flutter things at Google I/O. There you go.
True. Very true. Now, one interesting thing, remember to frequent the other tents this year, because I want to be careful how I say this, because it's actually a little embarrassing. It's not a big bragging point. We were all having so much fun in the Flutter section of I/O with that, whatever it is, small world or whatever, where you go bouncing around with your avatar and talking to people, that on the second day I went and explored other places such as ML and Android and Chrome, many others. Everybody was in the Flutter tent. They really were. And so be sure to go spend some time visiting others. Yes, Randall.
And I cannot actually confirm or deny that we talked about stuff like that in yesterday's GDE meeting.
That Flutter was hogging all the attention?
No, that specifically about some conferences, and there are some that were mentioned. Yes, and Flutter has become such a huge part of Google. It's so much part of the infrastructure, the ecosystem, that for a Google event to not have Flutter would be silly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And don't forget, you're going to want to check out a lot of these other things, because you can use them even if you're doing Flutter. I mean, come on, ML.
When you sign up for your ticket, they ask you to choose the topics you're interested in. Flutter is one of them. so they will notify you about the Flutter. If you check that, they'll notify you about the Flutter. When the schedule gets announced, they'll notify you about the Flutter things happening.
Okay, come on, folks. We have about 40 minutes to kill before Matt gets here. So we need more questions.
Is there a way to have separate widgets for iOS and Android without them being bundled in the final application if they are unused?
It's compile your app.
I was going to say, that's literally how it works. So you have tree shaking compilation, right? So if you're building for iOS, you can set Dart define. There's plenty of things that I think there's the platform tags. I can't remember, but yeah, it will get rid of all the things that you don't use in that build. So they shouldn't be included. There's no need to do like separate packages or separate things. However, I think I mentioned this last stream, there is still a little bit of a deficit in the fact that all assets are shipped in your app. Mm-hmm. It doesn't know when or if you use a specific bundled asset, so all assets are shipped.
So your images, your sounds, anything that you're adding.
And then you add in your PubSpec YAML's asset thing is going to be shipped.
And that's interesting too, because it's not going to look to see if you're calling the images. Because number one, if you are setting up for maintenance, you probably have a list of strings that are the image locations. So there is that possibility. Additionally, what is going to happen is the PubSpec YAML, when you run pubget, it's going to make that list of all the images then, of course, as you know, because add an image to your image directory, hot reload, and get frustrated because you can't access that image because you haven't had enough coffee to figure out you're supposed to shut down and rerun get.
Actually, I kind of wonder it now if they actually, if Hot Restart actually pulls those image updates across. I think it does if you do a data. No. If you do a data folder, so in your assets, if you include an entire folder, it knows when the files change. I think it ships them now. Whereas
it
the
has
original,
not been my experience. I've usually had to shut down and have pubget create a new list.
Yeah, if you do PubSpec, if you modify the PubSpec YAML, then you need to fetch it again.
Right, no, I'm talking about dropping an image into the folder.
I think it does update now. I can't remember. Anyway, try it and see. I was going to mention another thing. Most people don't realize this. So the image formats that Flutter supports, there's actually a page in the API documentation. But one of them,
according to Simon, it's bitmap, bitmap, and bitmap.
Exactly. No, the image. If I can find the damn thing.
So that has to do with the fact that Simon writes code that converts things to bitmap and then displays.
Here we go. I'll bring this up on stream. Should I? Is that big enough for everyone to see? So yeah, so JPEG, PNG, GIF. We all know this. Now, what most people should know is that JPEG is is 24-bit images, so they're photos and stuff like that. Good. PNGs, solid colors and various things like that compress well. GIF is just useless. Don't use that. Animate GIF is even more useless. Don't use that. In fact, all the websites that say they use animate GIFs actually use MP4. A GIF-V file, you might see a GIF-V mentioned in a few places online. They're actually MP4 files because animate GIFs are extraordinarily large files. Like an MP4 can be an MP4 of like 3 minutes can be like a meg, and an animate GIF of 3 minutes would be like 100 meg. It's like ridiculous, right? So yeah, animate GIF. Don't put them in your manifest, in your README files and all that. It's just terrible. In fact, the best ones you can actually do is WebP and animated WebP. So Google ship a set of tools that you can use for WebP. WebP gives you the benefit of JPEG and PNG combined, if you will. I won't go into the details. You go read up about it. But the point here is the WebP decoder is shipped as part of Flutter's framework. This means you get it even on iOS, where iOS native does not support WebP. Right, so you can have a WebP or animated WebP shipped in your assets and work on all the platforms that Flutter supports. And of course, you then have bitmap, and wbitmap for those that remember WAP. WAP. Okay. Yeah, and then obviously additional formats may be supported, but underlying platform, blah 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 blah. One of the ones that I really
silly question now, for people who are a bit old school and you're looking to create your own images, what would you use to convert, say, your JPEGs, your PNGs over to WebP?
They actually know what I was going to say. They make a tool, CWebP, compressed WebP. It ships as, if you just go look on WebP, Google have a developers page for it, which you can download like the tooling. I don't remember the URL off the top of my head. But I'm also waiting for this. I'm waiting for this to land. This has landed in the browsers in 2020. So AV1 is basically X265, and it's a standard for video that Apple have part of the founding board. So it's been integrated into Safari browser. Yeah, look, although Safari took 10 years to add WebP, it won't take the same delay here. Anyway, but AVIF is AV image format, right? And that's AV1 image format basically. And yeah, the difference is brilliant. So like a JPEG, 74 kilobytes, the exact same quality image, 18 kilobytes in AVIF and 43 in WebP. So this just shows you a comparison there of the sizes of content. And the same goes for, I think, some of the other examples here of you know, the differences between some of these. But yeah, you honestly, it's not until you actually look at like the closeness of quality that AVIF just has all round sort of, I don't know.
Interesting.
It is really interesting. I'll put this in the chat if anyone's interested. But
and I also have just tossed in the link for WebP. There is a WebP page at developers.google.com that goes into this, which is right there.
That's fine. And there's also WebM for videos, which is so WebP for photos, WebM for movies, basically.
So very cool. All right, lots of good questions here. I'm making an app that helps studying math. Can Flutter render LaTeX well?
Flutter does not render LaTeX natively. However, there are a couple of libraries for actually editing the mathematical input. It's called Math Keyboard, I think, Math_Keyboard in Pub. It's been a while. And there's also a renderer which renders mathematical equations as part of that. So yeah, so Math Keyboard is this package here. I'll bring it. Can I bring it up on the stream? Share. Yeah, so there's a package on. Oh, there we go. There's a package on Pub called Math Keyboard, and this has like an actual keyboard that you can enter mathematical expressions in, and it has a visual editor for it. There's text parser, build text string, text nodes. I think it was this one. No. There is a what's the name of the package? That's the one. KTeX, that's one. So this is by the same guy, Simple Club, KTeX, and I'll put that in the chat here. Yeah, this is essentially a LaTeX renderer for Flutter. So if anyone's not sure, I think there's a picture example somewhere here. But the one time I want something that actually has visual representation, it doesn't show it in here. But basically, oh, there you go. Flutter Math. That's the old one. Yeah, so it does this. So basically, what you're seeing here is this equation here. Well, here's one above. This equation here above in like ASCII text form spits out this image below. And the same goes for this one here. Spits out what this is below, and it does all the complex mathematical layout that you need to do to really show off equations. And KTeX does that now. And then there's the same chap did this math keyboard, which lets you enter the text in an editable form. So there's actually, oh, can I do this? Oh, there you go. So look at that. How cool is this? So I can actually like manipulate this. Can I actually change it? Probably. But the one time I want it to, and it's not gonna do what I want. Oh, there you go. I can type at the end. -5, enter. Whatever. But yeah, you get the idea. So you can actually like, so you can actually.
So there is also another one.
Come, did you find another one?
There's another one that actually Randall whispered in my ear like a little bird, and it has also been mentioned in chat apparently, which is Flutter Text. So, and I know this was just updated about a month ago. Whoops. There we go. And so you can check that one out as well to render fully offline.
Yeah, I think the other one does fully offline. I think it's because some of them require some APIs. I think, yeah, I know. I've seen this one as well. Yeah. In fact, I think this was the first one that came out of the two. The problem was entering stuff in. The problem is entering stuff in on the keyboard and like actually like being able to click somewhere in the equation, enter new bits in is a really difficult problem. And they've solved that in conjunction with the math keyboard one. They work together. So yeah.
So that's Flutter. That one is Flutter_Text. So let's see. Aha. 42 is not the ultimate answer to the ultimate question in the universe. The ultimate answer is it depends.
What's this? What's the question?
Can you show us how to set up a Flutter project, like how to structure your folders, where to put reusable widgets, state logic, set up tests? Well, okay, there's at least one here that's easy. You always have a tests folder that is the sibling of lib. That's the only easy part of this. Everything else is going to depend so much whether you're packaging by features or type, what type of state management solution you're using. If you're using block or Redux, it's going to mandate one structure. If you have Riverpod or Provider, things like that, it's going to allow you to be more freeform. There is also, of course, Andrea's opinion, which is there's no right answer.
Right. But he actually does go into explaining some of the common practices here, like you see on screen. Feature first versus layer first, and then goes through some of the pros and cons and explaining about how you operate with these different things.
But bounce back to that a moment.
What?
To the feature versus type.
Oh, what, the very, very top one?
Yeah, I noticed something. Ah, there we go. He's using source directories there.
Yeah, if you're doing a package,
so
you have
it's
a source directory.
For packages.
Yeah,
right. Well, that's for packages, not you don't normally use a source directory. Well, we're talking about structure. So source directory is typically package instead of
app. I mean, whatever. I've just dropped the link in the chat to that thread.
As you can tell, Simon is very strict about structure.
No, I'm trying to say in the source directory or not, it's the same. So doesn't matter.
Right.
Name it whatever you want.
But as far as reusable widgets go, that is really a feature versus type thing. When you're doing by type, all of your widgets will go into a widgets folder, which can get kind of chaotic. If you're packaging by type, you might do.
I do both.
Yeah, well, but you end up doing both. It's kind of funny. If you are doing something with real estate and you have residential apartments and residential houses and business buildings, right? You will have widgets that are specific to each one of these But when you have widgets that are common to all, we get into dry, which is do not repeat yourself. So now you pull those widgets out and put them into a common widgets folder, which is shared across all of them. The whole idea of structuring by type is if you're getting rid of a feature, you can highlight that folder, kill it, delete it, goodbye, and you have not hurt anything else in your app.
It's
Makes it
one
really
of many.
easy. It's one of many ideas, of many reasons to do it. But again, even if you're packaging by type, by feature, you're still going to end up with a common widgets folder, which is the way you would do it by type anyway, because they're common features.
I suppose you can have if you're doing the feature first approach, right? You could have a common feature which contains a widgets folder.
Now, here's an interesting one. I can tell you, if you're going to be doing an app that is both mobile and web, what you can do is create what's called a mono repo, and you have one repo for your app. For your mobile, one repo for your web, and then elements that are common to both. Like if you're using a common backend, create a repo called common inside of there, and they can cross-populate. And another interesting thing that I was taught by some redheaded guy in the room, what you do is you export everything from the common, and then that way, whenever you need to use it, all you do is you import common.dart, and you're done. You've got it all.
If anyone wants to know
so easy.
And see a good example of a monorepo, first of all, the Flutter package itself is the Flutter repo, but also here's a community one, which is the plus plugins. And in here we have our Melos configuration, ways of doing it. You can see here packages, and there's a bunch of packages, and each one of these packages, like let's say connectivity, will then have a bunch of more packages inside for like Linux, Mac, platform interface, web, so on. And then the top level one, which normally contains the Android and iOS implementations as well. So you can see, like, you can get quite deep and quite big with one of these monorepos. But
very quickly,
if you have a lot of interdependent packages, you want them in one place to version them together a lot of the time. So when you're looking at one version of the repo, you're looking at one version of everything essentially.
So, and it's just a larger version of the same thing. And instead of looking at the solar system, now you're looking at the galaxy. But what I mean by that is your mobile is a feature and your web is a feature, and anything that's common to both is going to be stored in its own common. So, and it's just like within your app, widgets that are common to all your features get put into a common widgets folder.
So you can have as many Dart packages as you want in your local repository, right? You can have as many as you want. You can include them in like modules in Android development. As many as you want. You can include them however you want, and export stuff from one, import them into another, and do whatever you want to try and organize. But again, they just end up with a high level of organization. So then you can not just buy features in your app, but then you can pull those features out and bring them into their own packages, share them across multiple apps. Like you might have a separate Flutter app for web versus app with separate dependencies it pulls in. There's all sorts of different ways of configuring these things. And
if you're still wondering a bit about this, if what we're saying is a little vague, go look up MVP, Model View Presenter, MVVM, things like that, and just look at the general way they're organized. Okay, look at the way that block is organized. And go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, like, it's what you just said there, just clocked in my head. You can get this thing when you're programming, where you know what you need, where you need to get to, but you're frozen by choice.
Mm-hmm. And right? You're frozen by. You got lots of good choices. When you look up those things I said, don't be looking for a common thread. That's not my point. My point is that this whole approach can be good, and this whole other approach that's completely different and has nothing to do with the first one can also be good, or you can cobble your own approach. I mean, what are you trying to do?
Well, this is what I'm trying to say. The problem most people have is how to plan plan what they need to do to get to their target. The problem is you need to have a fundamental understanding of how to structure it before you get there. So what you actually need to do is just do. A lot of people just don't realize Just do. It doesn't matter if the code you make is rubbish. It's chaotic, because what you've done is you've learned from that experience, and you go in and refactor it. You can change it. You can update it. It's not, you're not carving a stone tablet here. You can change it however you want. So just the point here is you need to start, right? So whenever you get into that situation where you're like frozen by choice, choose something and do it. Right? If it's the wrong thing, okay, you wasted some time, but you learned something from that, and you can move on. And all that time you wasted is not time you've wasted, because it's all knowledge that you've gained, first-hand knowledge that you've gained, and that will build up your experience. And whenever you start a new problem, you go, well, I'm not going to do that because that has these downsides, but that might be good for this other thing I'm doing, and you can start gaining that experience, right? Sorry, so many people just.
Well, what was that old quote that was attributed to Edison? It's probably not true, but maybe it is. I haven't failed 25,000 times. I've just figured out 25,000 times to not make a light bulb.
Right.
So, but the other thing too, as Simon said,
you fail when you stop. He would have failed to create a light bulb if he stopped trying to make a light bulb. That's the difference.
It's like in the stock market, you haven't lost until you cash out, or playing poker. But anyway, and another point that Simon said that really hit home, just go ahead and do it and make the mistakes, because what you need to do is learn why things are important. People can sit here and tell you all day, oh, this is important, that's important. Why? But if you go and you build it and you beat your head against it and you find out why this doesn't work and why it's such a chaotic mess, then the importance of organizing things maybe a certain way will present itself, and things will make a whole lot more sense and be more obvious. Let's see here. And of course, Simon steps away for the really, really technical questions. Let's see here. Let's see what we've got. Aw, isn't that sweet? We'll tell Simon that you said hi. All right. In the future, can the render engine support 3D? There are two parts to that. Can the render engine, can Skia support 3D? I'm taking an educated guess here and saying no. However, can Flutter support 3D? As long as people are interested in Flutter, it's going to keep improving.
Go look at my last few
whether or not
talks,
Skia is the what's that?
My last two talks were about 3D that I did. So the Flutter Festival London and Flutter Vikings.
Now, whether or not Skia is actually going to be the answer to that, I'm not sure. What do you got?
Skia does support 3D per se. Like it is an avenue to 3D, shall we say? So it doesn't give you any. It doesn't give you any 3D directly, but yes, soon my 3D engine will be finished, and everyone will be able to use that to do 3D in Flutter. There you go.
When do you have time to do a 3D engine? I mean, you still haven't looked at my PRs.
Not much at the moment. That's the problem.
All right.
Yeah, my
this is a question for all of us. Yes, this is a question for all of us. I think we're going to do me, then Randall, then Simon.
Get the question on the screen.
We'll go around and do this. Do you have any insights on what is currently blocking isolates to come to Flutter Web? No. Randall, What about you?
I say that it's the original model, which I was really excited about many, many years ago when first finding out about Dart and Dart being compiled to JavaScript, was that isolates would be mapped to web workers on JavaScript side. And the problem with that was that the semantic model was too different. So you couldn't build a common API that would run in both the VM and in JavaScript. And so that's always going to be the issue, I believe. I don't think there's going to be any attempt to take a drop-in code for an isolate and have it work on a web worker.
I think it's definitely possible to do multi-threading, should we say, on web using web workers, as Randall just said. And you can do that directly with Dart code, believe it or not. You can compile your Dart code over here. And this is possible. You can do this right now. Forget isolates, right? What you can do is just import Dart HTML, and you can use the web worker functions from your browser to start a background web worker, registry, and all that sort of jazz. Sorry, compile that with Dart web dev. They'll give you they'll give you the Dart to JavaScript, give you a bit of JavaScript, you include that in your main app, and then you'll be able to call the functions from the other piece of JavaScript and so on. So you can do that right now. It's just hassle, right? It's not like point and click and it works, right? But this is a lot of the things with web. This is the way the web works. Now, you could still call workers from your current one. However, the JavaScript that you're running in the worker has to be compiled from somewhere else, because your JavaScript for your Flutter web app is compiled as to one piece of JavaScript right now. This might change in the future. I don't know what the plan is. And the web worker system, I think Randall's talking about, I think they've changed that since then. I mean, that was, when did that come out? It was like 2016? No, it was before that. When did web workers come out? It's quite old now, actually.
Well, and also Randall has brought up another interesting point in the background, which is...
Wow, 2009. Blimey. Sorry.
Sorry, isolated worker. Randall, what do you got on this?
Nothing. It was just the first search, but I've come across it before. And what it's doing is it's providing a common API that then translates to isolates in the VM and to web workers on the web.
That sounds to me like what I was talking about, how you would do it. And they've made a library around it.
It's been done.
Oh, wait, you mean there's a widget for that?
Right. No. There's a package for that. Yeah, they are JS. What do they call it? JS isolated worker, except on web. Oh, easy. Sorry.
Except on web.
Literally it says features, easy to use, star, identical syntax to compute functions provided by Flutter, star, wait for it. And at the very end, it says star, except on web. So it's easy to use when not on web, and it's identical syntax to compute when not on web. So yeah, even they can't make it seamless. It's a difficult problem. Anyway, moving on.
We've got 9 minutes left to Matt. We hope, if he shows up on time. Matt's a very busy guy. Pre-cache. Init state or did change dependencies?
Depends on what you're doing.
There's the ultimate answer.
So I think he's talking about there is a function, a global function in the Flutter API called pre-cache image. I think it's called. Yeah, pre-cache image. Let me bring this up here. This one. And this allows you to give it a provider and a context, size, and so on. Now, I think if I remember rightly, in fact, we could probably go look at the source code here. The context is used just to look up the where is it? The one time I want it. It's this. Here we go. Yeah, so here it looks up the default bundle, and it says maybe of context. Does maybe of register, or does it mean it can return null? I think it still registers the context. To be honest, it only gets the device pixel ratio. I don't think it depends on if these register.
Could you blow that up larger?
Oh, sorry. So basically, yeah, if you just look, so I went from pre-cache image, and then the pre-cache image function just uses the context in one place in this function here, create local image configuration. And if I go look at that in the current file, we find this function, which is where it returns back all the things from the current context that it needs to load the image. So the bundle to where to load from, the pixel ratio to determine what ratio image to load, so the 2x, 3x, so on. Locale, text direction, and then the desired size if you've hard-coded size in.
So leave that up for a moment. Interesting factoid. One of the greatest skills of any developer in any language is being able to trace things. You just went on to that. Is that in your?
No, this is
that's
just from
on
no,
Stack Overflow, right? Or no, I'm sorry, not Stack Overflow. That's
went
GitHub,
from the
right?
API doc straight to GitHub.
Okay. How did you just do a click and follow on GitHub? Is that what you just did?
Yes and no. So what I've actually done, this took me to the function, and then I double click to highlight,
Right.
copy, Control V, Control F. You can't see the find box is off the top of the screen, sorry, and then paste. And then I hit enter until I find.
Okay, so that's within the same file. You're not bouncing between files on GitHub doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Now that's where it becomes a bit annoying, because if you need to then say, oh, if let's say I didn't find this in the current file, then I would have to go search the repository. And then this notoriously is not great. GitHub's code search.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And then
when I tried to use it.
And again, it only lists the first there may be, so it only lists like the first find this is
the first two in each file is what it lists.
No, it can even be one. Like, it's just because these are close in line numbers. And then there might be like 10, but it won't tell you that there's 10. You have to open up the file and then look through the file. So yeah, it's not great. Anyway, but yeah, you can see here it's mentioned quite a few times, and so on and so forth. Anyway, but you would have to go dig that out and find it and find a global function, but there it is there. So anyway, yeah, so I would put in DidChangeDependencies. There you go.
All righty. Let's see.
You obviously only want to. So to be clear, do you want to mute your mic? Yeah. To be clear, I'll just take him off stream for a second. So to be clear, it's great to do it in DidChangeDependencies because you need it for media query here. But again, if you only need it the one time, for example, the reason why it registers is, let's say you're in Flutter on desktop and you move your window from one monitor to the other, and they have different pixel ratios. So one's set at 200% scale, one's set at 100% scale. That device pixel ratio would be 2.0 or 1.0, depending on what monitor the window is on. So when you drag the window from one monitor to the other, you expect that to change, and then it to rebuild the UI of your app. So that's when your DidChangeDependency would be called again, and then you would reload the right image for that resolution. So that's good, just a good example of that in action. Does that make sense? But yeah, I mean, for the most time, you may not even need that.
All righty.
How to create iOS plugin and Objective-C frameworks. There's guides on the Flutter website. I think we kind of get this stuff up every week, but I'll bring it up here. So I've gone to flutter.dev, clicked on docs, takes me to the documentation, and over here on the left, there's writing platform-specific code under platform integration, which talks about how you write Objective-C or Swift, and then how the plugins work. And there's also another bit, packages and plugins, developing package plugins, and there's a lot of information there as well. This is the main thing that you want to do. Flutter create template. It'll be plugin in this case, not a package. So we're on the wrong section of the document. Basically, it's Flutter create template plugin. I believe, not package. And then that will give you the plugin example, which will give you all this, like the iOS and the Android folder and so on. And then, yeah, you could just delete the Android if you don't do Android, delete the Mac if you don't do Mac, and then you just end up with the iOS with your Objective-C in there. Now, there is also another web page that you'll probably need, which is this one, api.flutter.dev/Objective-C doc. And most people, that's it there. Most people don't know this even exists. So this is the official Flutter documentation for Objective-C. And it does exist. Here it is. And then here are all the classes that you can use, like a method call. And then, you know, what the possible parameters are and how you use it and all that kind of jazz is all in here. So, yeah, totally usable, totally workable. You can go find what you need to build your Objective-C plugin.
Very cool. We're going to skip down a few here because Matt's going to be here in a moment. Actually, this might be a great one to start with Matt because he sort of kind of knows a little bit about what goes on under the hood in Flutter. Maybe. I don't know, Matt. What do you think?
I don't know. What's the question?
I just meant whether or not you know anything about what goes on under the hood. But
no, that's all Simon. I just know what happens on top.
Oh, yeah. So, but this is something actually that every Flutter developer should know, and I think a lot of beginning and intermediate ones don't know. What does DidChangeDependencies do exactly? What's really going on there? Besides bit shift right and left.
Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell people how to find out for themselves, and we can talk about it. So first of all, api.flutter.dev. Right, this should always be open for beginners. Like you should never have this closed. This is your first website you go to, api.flutter.dev, and then in here you could search DidChangeDependencies and state class, and there you go. It tells you here it's called when the dependency of this state object changes. For example, when the previous code build blah 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 blah. Inherit widget, this, that, and the other. So this is actually the details, but you can go follow this, right? And then you can go follow this, and there's inherited widgets explained. That's going to tell me all about what this is and how it all works. So, the documentation is great. It's all there. You just need to go looking.
So 2 details that might help some people on that. First, unlike compile time code, this is not a compile time dependency that we're talking about, to be clear. So it's not like a subclass or a superclass. Also, often dependencies point down. Object A points to object B, so dependency goes from A to B, and you think like, oh, B is like a child of A and a dependency. Well, this dependency that we're talking about goes the opposite direction. It points up, so that let's say your button needs to access a theme. That theme is way up in your tree. It's an ancestor. When the button accesses the theme, the button now has a dependency on the theme, or at least the theme widget, even though the theme widget is like 20 widgets up in the tree. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at the concept of dependency.
And that's what I was about to mention there. It is not things that are dependent on the widget you're thinking of. It's the things that your widget depends on. Because your button depends on that theme.
Oh my God, right? Naming. Yeah, basically, when you say depend on this, you're registering to be a dependency of another widget, basically, or another piece of content. So, like we're saying that if you go up and look for let's say you do theme.of in Flutter, that's registering this current context that you get the of from. So that normally is the one that your code is in. It's registering that to the theme. So if the theme changes, your widget will be rebuilt. It will call the DidChangeDependencies. So you can like go fetch stuff from your dependents, and then your build function is called, and then you can update your widget.
See, now getting into naming, we did not. So DidChangeDependency doesn't mean that your widget changed dependencies. It means the dependency did change.
Yes.
So it might have been
English.
more clear to call it dependency did change instead of DidChangeDependency. I could do a whole talk.
I imagine
on
that
these
they're
things.
trying to match the did update widget, but it is what it is.
And the other side of this is did comes from the Objective-C / Apple framework, right? Where it's after something's happened, it's did, right? Okay. So that's also like a prefix used in a lot of the Objective-C / well, not Objective-C, but the Apple framework. Foundation.
One of these days, I'm going to do a talk on things like that, especially flexible flex, and flex fits. But that's another day.
Anyway, yeah.
All right, let's bounce back out.
Let's get a final few questions answered here, and then we're going to jump into Matt. We're going to talk about processing, I think. So.
I think this one's going to be a need more detail, need code, possibly Stack Overflow.
Getting ad limits for Google AdMob package. What to do? We're not ad people. Sorry. Good luck with that. It sounds to me like you're reaching some magical limit that some upper limit. So there's normally a way of requesting for the limit to be raised, like in the Google Cloud stuff. You probably have an AdMob control panel which you can request for it to be raised or raise a support ticket in some fashion. That's why I would go with that.
Listen to Tomek. Tomek is wise.
I tried to
His
sell
brother is
something
even
on,
more wise.
I tried to sell
API
something on eBay last night, and they told me my selling limit was 0. So I hit that sell limit real quick.
Yeah, it's like when I was. In fact, yeah, I've got a RTX 3090 around here somewhere. I'm looking to get rid of, but that's a whole different question. Simon,
I know. I just saw that one.
are you planning to merge it?
If I knew it existed, yes. So now I know it exists. I will go review it. So I don't even.
Okay, okay. We were not supposed to let the world know that you have the ability to do anything like this.
No. Adding snapping functionality. I see it. Okay. I will take a look. See what we can do.
So, all right. While he's digging into that, Matt, can we programmatically manipulate the widget tree at runtime? Now, this is a little bit better with some detail. Working on a project similar to an app builder, need to be able to access and manipulate the widget tree at runtime.
Well, every build method is manipulating the widget tree at runtime. So if there's a reason that you can't use build methods and regular composition, then I need to know what that is. But I'm not aware of any reason why even creating an app builder would prevent you from using the standard widget tree. What I will say is that there is a render pipeline, and you can assemble your own. You can assemble a second render pipeline. I haven't done it, and so some issues there though will be the primary render pipeline hooks into a bunch of services, things like all the touch events. If you create a second render pipeline, you either aren't going to have the touch events, or you need to figure out how to map the incoming touch events to your 2 different render pipelines. But I would.
You can be careful. You have to be careful. You can store the input pipeline if you map. It doesn't matter.
Well, whatever you do with it, there's only one source of touch input. So you got to decide what that means. Do you just play it twice on both of your render pipelines, or do you just send it to one or the other? But I would just try to use the existing widget tree structure. I'm not sure why you need anything else.
Yeah, I'm looking at that going, I can't think. I need to be able to access and manipulate. I think the problem here, and I think I've got the problem here. The problem is you're approaching this as if it's non-declarative UI, right? So when you have non-declarative UI, you get a handle to a widget or an element of the screen, and then you can manipulate that. You can change its size. You can but with declarative UI, you rebuild that part of the UI. It deals with caching the stuff underneath. You don't need to worry about that. When your build method is called, it doesn't just like throw everything away. It reuses what it can. It does all this magical stuff. I won't go into it right now. The point here is, it sounds to me like you're coming at this from a non-declarative point of view, and you have to learn declarative UI. So go read up about declarative UIs and how they work in Flutter. That's what I'm saying.
Well, and if what you really need is a custom layout, if that's what this person means, well, that's a custom render object. So you can go create a custom render object, wrap that with your own widget, and then you're still back in the widget tree. But render objects allow for imperative UI development.
Yeah.
All righty. One real quick, as you know, I did just mention that Tomek's brother is wiser. He's actually also more handsome. But for those who don't know, Tomek is an identical twin.
Yeah, we joke about his brother. Go on. Oh, did Matt buy those frames, or did he 3D print them himself?
Of course, I bought them for way too much money.
He's in California. Everything's too much money.
I could have just gotten probably some if these were just like reading glasses or something, they'd probably just be like $10. But instead, I went and got the full prescription with these ridiculous designer frames. But I probably wrote it off as a business expense. I don't know. It's part of my brand.
Do you actually wear them everywhere? Do you just wear them for the outfit?
No, I just wear them Like it's normally this hat and this shirt are hanging up on my wall over that direction, which some of you have seen if I've ever done a call with you guys. And then these glasses just sit around until I put on the hat and the shirt.
And then he becomes SuperDeclarative.
Yeah, I'm like the opposite of Superman. I put the glasses on and I get superpowers.
See, here's the thing. All right.
Do you take them off and people just don't recognize you? They're like, who are you?
That's right. Like, who is this
Matt
guy?
and Doctor Who are the only two people who still need a phone booth. Because Matt runs in and
Well, it's pretty simple actually. I just go from this, like, oh, who is that? Oh, that's SuperDeclarative.
all right. Can we implement bridging headers in Flutter iOS plugins, and how
Yes.
do we add them in the module map and use them in the Swift class files?
The same you would do in any project. I think if you're not listing in your project files, or if you're doing a plugin, it said plugin. Oh,
Yes.
you have to do it through the pod spec, if I remember rightly.
Pod spec, not pub spec.
Yeah, pod spec. There's a pod spec file, and that whole syntax I have not got a clue on. I just go googling every time I have to make a change. See what other people do on Stack Overflow. I go, oh, well, that looks like it's going to work, and test it. Oh, it worked. Great, fixed my problem. My iOS stupid build problem. So yeah.
The biggest
Actors-
problems in Flutter are the parts that aren't Flutter.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing, right? Like, this is the other side of this, right? Is just imagine you didn't have Flutter. You had to do all like these two separate platforms. You're like, oh god. No.
We were having that conversation. Where were we? Was that last
had
week's
it 10
stream or
times.
just privately
I-
when we were saying that people get all these headaches about Flutter and are blah, 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 and getting angry about can't do this, can't do that. And it's like, do you want to go back to writing them completely separate? And, oh, that was it. That was on the stream. And we jokingly called it fourth world problems. So,
right.
good
go on.
problems to have. Whoop. Okay. What's the best practices for bottom navigation bar to be persistent for all users?
I think for all screens. So most people have this problem as a new Flutter developer, that when they push to the navigator, they push into the navigator that's built into Material App, which replaces the entire screen. The quickest way to fix this, I'm not saying it's the best, I'm just saying the quickest way, is the Material App widget has a builder function that you can put your bottom nav in. So basically you can do a column, you can return a column from that with your bottom nav or a scaffold, whatever you want. With your bottom nav, but the child that's passed in is your main screen content, and that contains your navigator. So that what happens is the bottom stack remain where it is, and every time you push on your navigator, it will swap in the main screen, and your bottom nav will persist. That achieves what you want. However, it probably doesn't achieve what you want because everything will be navigated inside of that. So the other way is just to put a navigator. It's a widget, and you can put that in your UI wherever you want. So yeah, your main screen, your main sort of home, could just be a column with a navigator and this. So, Matt, do you have any ideas on that? Have I just gone for it all?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Scaffold and the navigator are in the wrong places. They have the wrong relationship. And so those are your two options.
Very cool. We have hit the end of the questions, and I believe you have other things to talk about.
I'm going to just mention one quick thing. You can just rebuild your Material App. So you can just put like a Material App and then have a column around that as well. But yeah, things get
Well, the
weird.
Material App has a whole bunch of stuff in there.
Yeah,
So you
like
probably don't want to
localization.
rebuild that on
Yeah.
a regular basis.
Pricey.
So I mentioned earlier, Matt, about processing. So I showed people the processing website, some examples. I was actually curious if you want to take us through, does Flutter Processing have a website?
It's a really difficult URL. It's flutterprocessing.com.
I just couldn't. I'm not joking. I couldn't find it anywhere. It's not on the. It's not on the package README file. So
You go from the website to the package, not from the package to the
Googled
website.
it, and I couldn't. I'm not joking. It didn't come up on Google.
Really? Google
Yeah,
needs to get their act together with their search engine.
Yeah, I could not find it on Google. And let me see if I can bring this up here. So it's this website here, Flutter Processing, and let's see if I can share this on stream. Unless you want to share on stream, Matt, and you can take us through some stuff.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. Let me get this figured out. Let's see, share.
You can just share Chrome tab if you want.
Well, I got the IDE open for some coding as well.
Yeah, show us, please. Take control.
Let's see.
So, and this is the package we're going to be talking about, Flutter Processing from pub.dev. I did speak earlier about what processing is. The actual processing.org website does have a really nice explanation. It says, processing is a flexible software sketchbook and a language.
Hey, I'm gonna be right back because I need to give Chrome permission. I guess.
Lovely Chrome permission thing. Yeah, go for it.
All right.
See you in a second.
All right.
Yeah, so it says processing is a flexible software sketchbook and a language for learning how to code within context of visual arts. Since 2001, processing has promoted software literacy in the visual arts and visual literacy within technology. Tens of thousands of students, artists, designers, researchers, and hobbyists have been using processing and learning and prototyping. So, yeah, I was going to say I call it a prototyping language actually. I actually learned processing for doing some interactive stuff some time ago, and there's a brilliant book on it. I wonder if it still exists. If I can find it.
Real quick, while Matt's doing that, question: do we have documentation for PubSpec in Flutter? Yes, it's at the Flutter docs. It's about a 5-second Google search.
To be honest, I'm just to be honest. Some of these questions you can just do Google Flutter PubSpec, and you're gonna you know.
Okay.
So,
logistical thing here. We have multiple places that banners can be created, and if they're not made in the Humpday folder, I can't find them to shut them off.
Yeah, they're all created in the live stream banners folder on purpose. You're in the wrong place. Anyway, I can't. I'm trying to see. Do I have a first learning process? I think I found the book. I just need to know what the first edition cover looks like.
And if I dive off camera, actually, I'll take a moment to say that right now. The very short version is I hope you all don't ever have to deal with a dog that has vestibular problems. Requires constant hand feeding and literally hand watering, pouring the water into your hand. Basically, the poor dog feels like the world is spinning all the time. So when I dove away, she was falling off the couch. Matt, welcome back. We've been killing time till you get here.
All this time, and Chrome still can't handle reopening what was open when it quit. It
works for me perfectly fine every
You
day.
used to work for a guy who was on that team, so I don't know what to tell you, man. Just call up Eric.
Why do you think he left?
Oh dear.
We're gonna get ourselves in trouble.
This is it. This is the book. This is the book. I believe this is it. I'll put it in the chat. Learning processing, and you can. I'll just quickly share this, and then we'll get back to Matt here. So yeah, this is the book. In fact, I think this is processing running in the background in JavaScript. But yeah, there's Amazon book. You can get learning processing, which will give you some steps. But we're gonna learn specifically about Flutter processing. So Matt, what have you got to show us?
All right, are we going?
Yeah, we're
okay.
Going. Rock and roll.
You said you looked at this website, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Briefly.
So this is the basis for all the work that I did. Processing is a project that began about 20 years ago, I think 2000 or 2001. And the idea was that you'd have these really convenient APIs for painting pixels, drawing shapes, images. Eventually, they even went to some 3D and some audio. But it was a way for artists and creative people to learn the fundamentals of programming, or even for new programmers to learn the fundamentals of at least graphics and audiovisual programming. Now that the original processing is written in Java, it has a Java API, It comes with its own IDE and it opens its own window. It's a whole self-contained environment. There are some other ports, like there's a JavaScript version called P5.js. But at least in terms of the original processing, my view was, well, it is useful for education, but then you're stuck with Java in this kind of desktop environment, which isn't going to lend itself to any professional opportunities. For a while, of course, you could take Java to Android, but even Android now is in Kotlin. So the Java world of processing is really just educational. It doesn't really have a professional side. I said, well, what if we allowed you to do all the same things in processing, but using Dart and Flutter instead of Java? And you could do it from Android Studio, where you do all your normal Flutter stuff. Well, then if you learn Flutter processing, you also have a direct path into Flutter itself and app development and all that. So it's education and it's professional in one, which I think, Simon, you also brought up the Flutter processing website, right?
Yeah.
So there's the message right there.
Do you want to screen to yourself, and you can? Would you want to stick around? I don't know. If you want to present this a little bit more, so we can get out the way. I'm thinking.
Sure. Can you just turn off your video and keep your audio?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, here's the message. So learn visual programming with a tool that you can turn into a career. So if you go to flutterprocessing.com, you can make your way over to the main processing website. Now, I've also linked to Flutter, and you might be like, well, why would you link to Flutter? We all know Flutter. Well, my hope is that eventually people who don't know how to program at all will use Flutter processing as an introduction into programming. So you can also link over to Flutter. And then here are a few pieces of generative artwork that were created with Flutter processing. We'll take a look at those in a moment. You can see very quickly how to get started. This is literally the entire entry point that you need to start working with Flutter processing. Not much to it. You can also work inside of the more traditional class-based approach instead of defining everything in your widget tree. And then here's just an example of one thing you could quickly create with Flutter processing. That's the website. And then over here, if you want to pull up the package on PubDev, here it is, currently version 0.20. And you can find some information. We'll look at this demo app right here in a moment. But again, you're going to be met with how to get started and all that stuff. Also, over the last year, pretty much everything that I implemented in Flutter processing, I recorded a video showing myself implementing it. So you can literally watch me build most of those APIs. Squares and rectangles, triangles, quads, lines, points, ellipse, on and on and on. And then we have some exercises here where we create some visuals. But all these videos, this is what all of you missed over the past year. So go catch up on all that stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of content to view there.
Okay, now let's go over to the demo app. All right, so here, if you pull down the repo and you run the example app, this is what you're going to see. And initially it's blank because you're seeing this sketch that you can just fill in with whatever you want. But then let's open up this generative art tab right here. We can click on circle art. Now, this is not an image. This was generated right now, and you'll notice that it is the same as this image right here in the header of the website. So I literally painted something with Flutter processing that I then saved off to a file and used as an actual asset in the web page. We have a little...
I've got a quick question for you.
Yep.
Can I run Flutter processing as a widget in, say, a Flutter website?
Yes. I can't speak to the performance of that. And also
yeah.
on web, I don't... There may be issues with the bitmap system on web. I'm not sure I've tried it. But technically, yes. Okay, and here's a little network. This isn't a real network or anything. It's just nodes that get near each other, but this kind of a visualization of a network. And as things get closer together, suddenly lines appear between them, edges in the graph, and they get further apart, they disappear. Liquid gels doesn't quite work. So we have the blending modes working here, but the contour, the splines that are used in this animation are not yet supported. So you got to figure out how to draw those splines.
Are these demos ones that you've come up with, or the standard ones from us?
So these these three here at the bottom actually all came from Open Processing, which I think you said you also brought up, right?
Processing.org. I don't know about Open Processing.
Okay. So Open Processing, here's the web page, and it's just filled with sketches that people have created with processing. Now, these are either written in Java or JavaScript, so you can't just copy them over, but what I did was copy the Java or JavaScript, and I just ported it to Dart, just converted the calls. Not everything in here is going to port because Flutter Processing doesn't support all of the processing APIs. But for example, this one right here, Wobbly Swarm, if I click on that, you see this stuff going on right here. So if we come back to the example app and I go Wobbly Swarm, there it is.
Nice.
So that's where a few of those came from. And Solar Storm, same thing here. It's kind of like if humans occupied a bunch of planets and then went to intergalactic nuclear war with each other. That's kind of like watching all the missiles.
Sounds so happy.
Yep, it's inspiration.
It's so inspirational for the human race.
What you'll notice here is that we have the image that every frame includes the image from the previous frame, which you may not have stopped to think about, but by default, like you can't do that in Flutter because Flutter is all based on this canvas, painting a canvas, and a canvas resets all the visuals on every frame, which makes stuff like this impossible.
So is this using the pixel features of processing then?
It is, but then the question is how did it get here? Because processing obviously didn't include anything. So what I'm doing behind the scenes is I'm always mixing two things. I'm mixing the canvas and I'm mixing a bitmap. So anything that you can draw with the canvas will use the canvas, your lines, your circles, your rectangles. But then if you ever try to set a pixel or a set of pixels, it'll actually rasterize the canvas to a bitmap and then set the pixel colors. And then it'll go back to canvas drawing if you choose to do so.
You know, sorry, what was the Flutter event before Interact?
Was it Engage or was that one after?
No, that was after. Oh, maybe it was Interact then. I don't remember. One of them, I think VGV did some sample apps, and I worked with them on a couple of the sample apps. I remember doing a painting one where basically it was the same sort of thing where you render. So it was like drawing with the mouse on a canvas. And what I do is as it drew one spline of lines, it would then save that to a bitmap as a cache. And the next line you draw, so you're only actually ever drawing a bitmap and one line. After you finish drawing that line, it gets stored in the image, if that kind of makes sense. So it's kind of like painting, right? So as you actively edit that line, it's all been drawn actively, but then once you finish, it's cached in that bitmap, as it were.
Yeah, and there's a known performance problem there because working with bitmaps, well, at least if you want to apply operations from the canvas, you have to use a screen or a picture recorder and some other tools, and it requires you to go into the engine and then load the pixels from the engine and then send operations back into the engine. And so in a single frame, there might be a bunch of back and forth with the engine because there's no shared bitmap data with the engine.
It's exactly that's exactly why I was doing it after they do one sort of entry with the mouse. So as you press down and move around, it's being painted active in the canvas. As soon as you lift your mouse button, it then does that transformation with it. So you're only ever having one hit with the engine for every one interaction, as it were, rather than every pixel.
Yeah. And of course, one of processing's APIs is literally set a single pixel. So here we have to support that. Really, I would like Simon, you and I have talked about this many times, but I would like for Flutter to have shared bitmap memory that the GPU can paint. And then we could get much better performance on all this stuff.
I'm going to share something that everyone, if they're interested in a very similar feature, is what we need. And this, you can go thumbs up this issue ticket. It's 37180. I'll put it in the comments. It's literally what we need to solve this problem. So this has been around since 29th of July 2019. So there's a lot of conversation around how we do this. I call them mutable bitmaps, but basically the idea of being able to have bitmaps that you can edit that can still be painted without having to essentially recache the entire bitmap. So yeah,
that's what we need. This would be a lot more performant if that was the case.
So yeah, go thumbs up that if you're interested in this and what's the better, higher performing stuff.
Okay, back to the example app. So the Coding Train is a channel on YouTube from an educator at NYC who teaches all sorts of visual programming techniques using processing. He uses both original processing and P5.js. And what I did was take a number of his exercises and I recreated them using Flutter Processing. And there are videos for most of these as well on my channel, but the example app also includes the implementation. So for example, Starfield right here kind of makes it look like stars are coming at you going warp speed or something. And there's a snake game, which we can play. This one actually has controls. So I'm actually playing this with my keyboard. And if I hit a wall, it's game over. And then Purple Rain, mitosis simulation, Perlin noise flow field. So this is one of the paintings that you saw on the Flutter Processing website. Metaballs, this one's pretty cool. This one would definitely benefit from custom shaders. Now, if we use custom shaders, it wouldn't be processing APIs anymore. It would be your shader language. But this is definitely the kind of thing that you'd want to do on the GPU. It's slow in software. Phyllotaxis, this is kind of a floral pattern. I made a little bit of a Dash Flappy Bird clone. So I'm also playing this very carefully, pressing spacebar, trying not to hit these pipes. If I do, game over. And then Blobby, the interesting thing here, so it's what you're looking at, as you can tell, is just a bunch of line segments connected together. The interesting thing is that these line segments, they're random, and yet they're all relatively close to each other, and it's continuous. Notice that you can't tell where the drawing begins and where it ends. And I'll leave that up to you to figure out how that works. Circle packing. We can print Flutter with circles. Let's see, random walker. This one's pretty boring, but this is just a very basic algorithm that you just move literally randomly in different directions and you paint wherever you go. And so you can get these random patterns that get filled in over time. And then we have the game of life. So this is the standard game of life algorithm here, where each generation is based on rules from the previous one, and maybe eventually everybody dies, or maybe you get some static setup like you have over here, or maybe you just keep growing. And then finally, Boyd's, kind of a simulation of
flocking.
Yeah, flocking, birds, and herding and things. So those are all of the... So the Coding Train has videos that show you how to create all of those things that I just showed you using either regular processing or P5.js, but you can also find them here using Flutter Processing, and you can find videos on my channel for most of those implementing it in Flutter Processing. And then down here, we have some wacky stuff. There are certain parts of the API that weren't exercised in those examples, but I've implemented. So for example, masks. Why is there a Punisher logo on top of coffee beans? I don't know, but it's there. Image resize. This was so again, we're painting pixels and we're doing it through these Flutter Processing APIs. So I'm not using image providers with image widgets the way that Flutter does. So I had to make sure that when you draw an image, you can request any size and it does the right scaling thing that's expected. Image blending. Here's a bunch of images. So what you're seeing here, again, this is not done by the GPU. Every single pixel on the screen is being painted by Flutter Processing, and we are looking at every color and we are applying a blending mode between every pixel that we're painting in the bitmap.
Is there a reason why you couldn't use the canvas draw image with blend modes? Or is this just the way the processing works with the caching of the image?
There might be times where that's possible, but I'm not sure that it's universally possible. And so, I guess I have to check. Maybe I did actually end up drawing these images using the canvas draw image with a blend mode. That might be what I did. Although the thing is, processing doesn't necessarily have the exact same blend modes as Flutter. I have to go back and look. So I have to go back and look. Maybe I'm drawing this on the canvas.
I'm just curious. Yeah.
It definitely isn't an image widget. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And here's image filters. Now this one is, I believe, pixel by pixel. I'm pretty sure this one is. So these are kind of our standard. Now this one, I guess I need to figure out what's going on there. Maybe that's one filter I didn't implement. But these are some standard filters, I think, that are supported by processing. And so like this one up here where you see my mouse, this one's just a desaturation. So take the image, convert all the color into black and white, and there you go. And you can go pixel by pixel by pixel and apply that bitmap.
Good old Rodrigo here. He says Flutter lacks some blend modes. It does. Although, you know, I kind of wish. I think we all. I mean, when you're doing stuff like this, what you really want is the entire skier surface, right? You want the entire skier API, surface API, so that you can like really kind of do all of these things custom. So you know, like this, I think skier that's well, I'm pretty very sure that skier lets you specify your own kernel. So that's your own filter kernel that lets you then you can just throw that into a filter function. It will just run that across the image, but do it in the GPU. So you kind of get all this stuff in the GPU. The only reason, I mean, it's just the way the Flutter pipeline works that we're doing this in software, right?
Yeah. And although also, again, for educational purposes, I still want the bitmap control that you showed the ticket for, because even though the correct place to do a lot of this stuff is in the GPU, if you don't even understand the nature of setting individual pixels,
yeah,
then that's two major things you have to learn. You have to learn the fundamentals of pixel painting, and you have to learn the shader language. And by the way, it's probably pretty tough to debug a shader algorithm, whereas here, you're just writing Dart code and you're setting pixels, so you can kind of see what's going right and wrong.
You can set breakpoints. That
too. Yeah. So I want both of those things.
We want it all.
All right. And then text. I am drawing this text. This is not a text widget, but I am using the draw paragraph in Canvas. And I couldn't quite get this to work the same way that processing does. These examples you're seeing here come from the official processing docs. Like, for example, the alignment here is not quite right. All of these pieces of text are supposed to be aligned with this line at the top, and you can see that they're not. And this has to do with some of Flutter's text metrics that I couldn't get around. Like, so if I set, I don't know if it was leading or what it was here, but without going example by example, I couldn't get the desired outcome in terms of leading, in terms of that space above the text. So that is what it is.
They have a new parameter for text height, if I remember rightly, which tells you to ignore the padding inside the font to kind of then force your own specific leading, I think. Maybe. I don't know. Could be.
Although maybe processing expects the font padding to be respected as well. I'm not sure. But in any event, this was... So I didn't want to... I think there was a reason I didn't render these out to golden tests, probably because of the font. But in any event, I put all these here so you can quickly see all these different text scenarios.
So what we're looking at here is a demo app that lets you choose from these different things. But what's this on the right? Is that capture image? These buttons?
Yeah. So if you want to take a screenshot, if you want to record image frames, and what that is it's like a video, except you're getting all of the individual frames.
Oh, like a Flickbook kind of deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you can record a GIF. It's just obnoxiously large. I can't remember who it was that authored the GIF encoding package on PubDev, but I think he said that they realized that it's nowhere near optimized and that's you will know that for sure.
But even that optimize, I was saying this earlier actually before you came on stream. The GIFs are just not designed for this usage, and the use case that the way that GIFs actually work is not meant for this. It's meant for like small animated frames of like 10 frames. It's not meant for like full color motion video, right? And in fact, websites that say that they are animate GIFs are actually, they say GIF V. I don't know if you've seen this anyway, GIF V, and the URLs and so on. That's actually an MP4 file just named GIF V.
So if you drop one of those things into a web page, will it automatically play like a GIF, or does it come with video controls and that kind of stuff?
Well, the browser interprets it and it plays it like, and it just plays it like a video without controls. But if you had just had the direct URL, yes, it would do that. But the URLs actually return back, because they're accessed from a browser, they return back a little bit of HTML, which wraps the request. It's weird and funky things to get around the fact that people want to use video like GIFs and videos similarly. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. The reason I ask is because I want people to have the ability to capture something here and put it on Twitter very easily, but I don't want it to appear like a video. So if what you're saying does the job, then if someone wants to implement that here, they're more than welcome to do so. I'm not a fan of this record GIF capability that I have here, but it's the only one that I've got right now that wouldn't actually produce a video. And I don't want a video. I want something that auto plays on Twitter and elsewhere.
But don't the videos do that?
I don't think video. Do videos auto play on Twitter?
Yeah, on Twitter they do and stuff. Yeah, like I think it's about like if you link to a video, or if you upload a video. So if you upload a video, they autoplay. They're like small snippets, right? But if you link to a video like a YouTube thing, they don't autoplay, right? They're external.
True. Okay. So well, maybe it makes sense to add a video option here or something. It'd definitely be a whole lot smaller of a file size in a video. And then also over here, you can restart the sketch, which doesn't do much here. But if we go back to something like network, I can restart it. And that's useful also when you're playing the games. You definitely need to be able to restart. But also this is nice that just before you take a screenshot or something, you can restart it and capture the whole thing. And then down here, we have background colors. So if you want to go dark mode on the background, you can, or white to be more classically artist related.
So you can't edit, so you can't like live edit your processing code. So it's still compiled like Flutter code.
That's right. And of course, if there's enough demand, we could look into building essentially a code editor, but that would, I need to see a lot of people show up and ask for that before I consider trying to do something like that.
I think it's kind of interesting, right? Like we talk about, if you go back to your, well, you have to go back to an example, like the text, like when we render text, right? Let me put myself back in. It's kind of interesting when we render text like that. Most people don't realize that is exactly how, it's not just, that is a picture of text, right? But that's how all text in your monitor is rendered. Those tabs in the background, that's just a drawing of text, right? Like when you're editing in your IDE, that the code is a image painted of text, right? Like if that kind of makes sense. A lot of developers don't see the difference between text and image. So they see a complete difference in the two, right? But they are the same thing, right? It's just you're taking a font and rendering it out to.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that it feels different is because you put your cursor over it, it turns into that text-shaped cursor, and then you select, and suddenly there's these colored boxes around it. But that's all just gesture recognition, and then painting, blue boxes behind the text. Which, if you want to understand more about that, go check out SuperEditor, where I've kind of reinvented most of Flutter's text system.
And if you look at Flutter Festival Silicon Valley, you'll find your talk on it. So there you go.
Yeah, there too.
Slide it in there. Anyway, go on. So can we see some of the code? Or did you want to go through something else? Sorry, I'm just jumping.
Yeah, that was all the examples. So we can look around here, like this. So this right here, by the way, is the empty sketch. So if we come back to the example, click on empty sketch. This is now looking at that code. And so,
so you're actually running that app in the background as a desktop app.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And
so if you
I guess
just hit save, it hot reloads the desktop app, and you can see it.
Yeah, and I
you basically the same as an editor right now, so it's not a big deal, right?
yeah, I mean hot reload is pretty much as good as actually having an editor built for that purpose. And so if we come in here and we say like s.fill with, let's say, colors green and save, it should have refreshed here.
When the demo gods, right?
Well, so maybe I opened the wrong file. I could have swore that was the empty sketch. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe I just have the wrong thing open here. Let's see what we can find then.
Live debugging.
Let's see.
Empty sketch. I saw one up there. Empty sketch.
Yeah, I mean, that should be. Maybe it's something with how I'm building the item here. Let's so on trying to think if I need to.
If he close the desktop app and hit play again, see if it actually.
All right, we'll take a minute to launch it, but we'll give it a try.
In the meantime.
Oh, so actually, I know. This was it was dumb of me to do this. Fill is a setting in processing, not an action.
Before you do background. Yeah.
So like background will actually flood fill, but fill just says the next time you paint something, what should the fill color be? We'll wait for it to launch again, and then I'll show you what I should have done, which is draw a rectangle.
No, I knew that as well, and I didn't even. It's been so long. Oh. So it's kind of interesting because a lot of drawing takes this approach. Like a lot of drawing on computers takes this approach of applying settings and then using those current settings to perform your draw actions. So in this case, yeah, as you see here, you're setting fill, and then you do rect, and it uses the last time you called fill to fill that rectangle, basically. So rather than specifying an extra parameter to the rectangle.
And Simon, you tell me when this is no longer going to be a problem. Why am I saying? Wait, let me see if that. Yeah, I think I have to say 2 double.
Yeah.
It's so. Why have they done this?
It's interesting because
what I'm wondering is where did that single letter variable come from?
It's in there. It's a parameter
right there. So okay, so let me clarify something here as well.
The joke went right by.
Yeah, you're right. It did. I still don't know what the punchline is, but okay. There's
single letter variables. Period.
Well, so the reason it's a single letter variable is because in traditional processing, the sketch is the object that you're defining, and so it would be like this dot, which unless you're using a terrible language like JavaScript, you never have to actually reference this dot to avoid mistakes. So normally you just say size. But what I've done here to make this a very simple sketch is I've allowed you to pass in callbacks. So instead of defining a new class, you just pass in your setup and draw methods, and then you can access the sketch and call whatever you want on it.
But you could also define your own class that's a sketch.
That's right. So I'll just, as an example, if I say my sketch, let me scroll that up a little bit, extends sketch, and then we can say setup, and I think I need to import that for asynchronous. And we can say draw, and I think it's weird. Does that need to be?
Yeah, they both need to be async.
Oh, no, the problem is this. I don't know why it auto-generates that function thing in there, but it should be returning nothing. So this is normally how you would define a sketch in traditional processing. And then here you could say size, no S required. And down here you could say fill, no S required.
And rect and so on, yeah.
Again, to literally think about this from the entry point standpoint. Like let's come back.
I've got a question. Sorry, before we jump in, what you've just done, that wouldn't hot reload the same way because it wouldn't rebuild the sketch, right? Like when you do it with your simple one, you're reprocessing the functions.
Well, let me see, because I may have built that into the processing widget. Let me go find the processing widget. So here's one thing in the demo app, at least. That's when you restart the sketch. I was seeing if I overrode the lifecycle method. let me come down here to the processing widget. And you don't need to, all of this code is the example app code. You don't need to understand any of this. This is all for managing these tools on the side and things. Here's the processing widget. Here's what actually does all the widget work for processing. I'm trying to see if I overrode the life cycle.
Matt, speaking of things like life cycle and state, we do have a question. Can the animation from processing change the state while it's running, as in change the blend mode and then receive an event?
Can the animation change state when receiving an event? Yes. That's exactly what you can do. Yes. So you can say like add a keyboard on the keyboard touch or on a mouse input, change the state in some fashion. Yeah, you can do that.
Well, and it also depends what you mean by animation. There are no animations in Flutter processing. This motion. Yeah. So let me visit how this part works, and I'll do that with this example. Let me get rid.
Get a green box working.
Oh, okay. Save that. Come back here. There's your green box. Okay. But now notice that this is all in the setup call. Setup is called once at the beginning of your sketch. Then there is draw. And draw is called as many times and as rapidly as it can be. Now, if we always draw the same thing, then, oh, nothing happens. There's no animation. But if we come back here, let's iterate over every pixel in the sketch. So let's say for, I don't know, column equals 0, where column is less than s.width, plus equals 1, and then we'll go down the rows.
I don't know why that always irks me. I always do plus plus.
I used to do that as well, and then Ian, the tech lead for Flutter, always did this, and I figured, there's probably some good reason for that. Okay,
I think it's more about legibility for people that don't know what plus plus does, right?
Could be, or also plus plus has an implicit. It's two operations in one. That's another.
Well, and also with this, you're not limited to just one. You can put any number there you want.
That's fine. But people can worry about basic Dart stuff another time. Let's set the color of a pixel. Okay, so we're going to call set, which means set pixel, and the X is going to be the column, Y is going to be the row, and for the color, what we're going to do, I want to use a random color, but I want it to be grayscale, so it looks like noise on a TV screen. For that, we can probably say HSV color, and why am I not getting autocomplete here? Do this. Alpha will be 1, hue doesn't matter, saturation will be 0, and then the value we will say const random hello. Random next, let's see, what is
next
I think
double?
it's between 0 and 1, and then we'll say
is it, or is it 0 to 255?
Zero to 1.
No.
HSV color is different in this regard from regular color. Now, what is it?
I think it's HSL rather than HSV. I can't remember.
Error here somewhere.
Const, yeah.
Well, whatever. Oh, something is wrong in my color there.
Change the like that one to 1.
Let me make sure alpha. Okay, alpha 0. So hue, any value should be fine here because color we're getting rid of. Saturation 0 because we don't want any color. And then like this should be a random brightness. Well, let's try then. Fine, let's just go random colors. So we'll say color, and then
just put colors.red and just see if you get a red box, right? Like
Technology. Oh yeah. Well, no, let's see. Why is that? I think I may need to do this. I may need to say load pixels and then update pixels. Here's the red. That load pixels and update pixels is manual control over the bitmap cache. So you draw to a bitmap cache, and then if you actually want to apply that to the screen, you need to call update pixels. Load pixels this probably isn't needed in this case, but load pixels would apply any outstanding operations to the cache. Then you can draw to the cache. Then you can update the cache to the screen. But now let's go back here and let's try what we were trying a second ago. So HSV color, and we'll say alpha is 1, hue 0, saturation 0, and then random next double to color. All right, there we go.
Way.
So
Hey.
we've
We're in the 90s.
We've animated the screen, and yet there's no animation controller, there's no tweening, there's no interpolation. We're just drawing every pixel on the screen over and over and over again. And because random changes all the time, every single frame is different than the previous one, and now we're animated.
Do you know what's really cool? Is when you use pseudo-random number generation to place things on the screen. So I've done that before. That's kind of fun.
Okay, before you guys get into something like that, I'm going to pop in and say goodbye because I'm going to pop out.
Okay. Well, we'll see you next week.
Hey, thanks for coming, Matt. This looks great. I've got a dog who's going to need some stuff here in a moment. So,
wow, good to
look
see
at
you. And Scott, go use Flutter Processing.
Yes,
absolutely. As soon as Simon doesn't have any more deadlines for me.
Well, good luck with
that. Right.
Now, there's another type of. Did I already showed the Perlin noise, right? I guess not. This is another type of random, but you'll notice that it looks a whole lot more continuous. And this is Perlin noise as opposed to just random noise. And Perlin noise was invented, I don't know, in the 70s or 80s or something. And it was invented for the purpose of generating random textures for like creatures in movies. It was for this all movie CG. Because obviously you want creatures and you want terrain to be random.
1983.
Okay, 1983. But like, let's say terrain, for example. You don't want the same terrain everywhere in your movie or video games. But at the same time, the elevation at any place in the world is very similar to the elevation near that place. Like otherwise you'd be walking and then all of a sudden you'd fall off a cliff or you'd run into a wall. Terrain moves up and down over time, but in relative areas, it's predictable. Perlin noise is an algorithm that generates random values, but the random values are continuous. Every next value is just a little bit more or a little bit less than the value before it. And so what you see here is that we can actually generate something like a terrain. If we just took a still shot of this, you could imagine that the white areas are hills and mountains, and the dark areas are valleys or lakes. And this is literally one of the things that Perlin noise is used to do. And you don't have to use Flutter processing to get easy Perlin noise. These random values came from a package that includes multiple noise generators, and I just kind of adapted it to the Flutter to the processing APIs. But this is what you're seeing here is essentially the same thing that we just did by painting pixels with our random generator. The difference is that instead of using this random generator, there is a method called noise, and then that's what generates it. Now, there's the values that you pass in for noise are a little different. Let's see if we can get this roughly working. So let's pass in column, row, and let's just see. Just see what that shows us. Okay, showing us nothing. Okay, sorry. First of all, that's just a noise value. So one thing, I need to take that out of there. What we're replacing is this random part, not the whole painting part. A comma in there. So we're setting
two-dimensional noise, basically.
Yeah, you can do 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional, or 3-dimensional.
Ooh.
So we're setting a pixel color at this X and Y with this color, and this color is based on the noise value, the Perlin noise value at an XY position. And that's
essentially
still not showing anything. Let's see. What's it complaining about?
I'll restart.
Well, I just did that, so it's complaining about
the V value is probably out of range.
Well, no. Oh, I think it's -1 to 1. That's the problem. Yeah. So there's a method in Flutter processing called map. So we can take that value, and then I think we can map it to
these functions, map, noise. These are all standardized to the processing way of doing things. So if anyone reads the processing documentation, these are very similar. But then you've also got your own ones as well. So
I'm so tired of this num and double nonsense. It's so dumb. 5 positional. We have to tell it we're going from -1 to 1.
When that came in? I just remember when that came in. It's when Dart went to strict to types from Dart 1 to Dart 2.
I think it came in with null safety actually, but I don't understand why they can't. Okay, boom, there we go. We just paint. So a minute ago we were looking at, where was it? A minute ago we were looking at this, and now we've just repainted it. Now this one isn't animated because we're just painting. The way you can think of Perlin noise is like a sponge. Think of an actual physical sponge in 3 dimensions. Take one layer off that sponge, and that's what we're looking at right here. If you want to animate it, you have to go down into the sponge, layer after layer after layer, and that's when you use 3-dimensional Perlin noise. So instead of just an X and a Y, we also want a Z value, and that Z value needs to change. Now there's
time. Can we get time?
Frame count. So we
actually had a question come in on the chat, and this kind of relates to this. I think it's thanks, Matt. But if we have many different devices, can they have the same time tick? I mean, the delta time refresh related to the refresh rate. And I think
I'm not sure what that means.
I think that's essentially what we're talking about here, right? So you can get the frame count? Can you get the frame time, the delta time for the frame? So if you skip a frame by mistake, you're going to be caught up on the next frame.
I don't remember if there's a built-in API for that or not. Let's see.
So you can set your frame rate. So you have a fixed frame rate.
Yeah, I would probably just use Dart's built-in timing system, but I'm trying to remember if I implemented clock in here or not. The minute, year. Let's see.
Essentially, it's normally you have a lot of these things. You have T and DT, which is like T for time and DT for delta time between the time between the current frame and the previous frame, to give you some indication as to how you can increase your animations and keep them consistent.
Not seeing it. So either I missed it, it doesn't exist, or it's in the processing APIs, but I haven't implemented it. So if we go to reference here, if somebody finds it here, then we can implement it. There's this general time. I guess maybe you could call millis. So that is starting the applet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably what you would use for that purpose.
Yeah, that give you a consistent increase in time value.
No, did I implement that? Let's see if I implemented that correctly. Let's say print.
If you use that as your Z value.
Yeah, that's probably correct. And if I hot restart, it starts over, probably. Maybe not. Why did it not?
Live debugging.
Oh, now I don't think, I think I've overloaded. Like, notice that I can't hot restart again.
Oh,
Okay,
there
there
you
it
go.
goes.
There
It
you
just
go.
took
Did start,
forever
yeah.
to hot restart. So,
If
that's what you
you
want.
could use that as your Z value as well, as long as it's an increasing value, then
yeah. And the thing about the Z value is that there's kind of a very specific range that actually that's not too slow and not too fast. So it's just a matter whether you use frame count or whether you use the millis, you just need to get it at a reasonable number. And so apparently the frame count here, well, we can see what it takes with the, so let's see what that does right off the bat. Okay, so that's probably way too fast. So if we divide that by, let's say 10.
probably divided by 100 or 1,000, right? Wow.
So that's somewhere between 10 and 100, let's say 50.
But the frame rate.
Yeah, the frame rate's really low here. And that's the reason why over here.
And this kind of comes back to what we were talking about. It's smaller, so you can get an increase in frame rate because you're processing less pixels, right?
Yes. So here we're painting way fewer pixels, and so it's smooth. If you come back here, 500 by 500, we're painting like I don't know, 10 times as many pixels, and it's super slow. Now this is also why if you're doing this for real in an app for some reason, the right place to do this is in a shader, because it would be super fast on the GPU. But also if Flutter, remember, we are not only are we setting every pixel in a big list in Dart, but we're shoving that over to the Flutter engine and loading it back every single frame. So if Flutter had mutable bitmap data, like if your canvas could set pixels, this would probably be dramatically faster as well.
And essentially, then whenever you're manipulating a pixel, it could just be pushed over to the texture in the GPU or whatever, and bam, it's there instantly. There's no overhead.
That's right. And I imagine if the Flutter engine implemented that, they could also connect that pixel buffer possibly directly to GPU memory. I don't know for sure, but that seems like it should be reasonable. Yeah, and so then you're getting the fastest pixel memory possible.
Yeah, you can definitely do that with Skier and its system. I think it's a case of like it's quite in the world of 2D UI. You want to upload the images that you're using as little as possible, so they all have their own ID numbers and they're all like can be referenced to that. This is already in the GPU memory, so we don't need to push it again on the next frame, right? That's a very common practice because the images don't change all that often. That's one of the reasons why the video player, for example, is a texture that can be directly written to by the video decoder on your hardware, and it doesn't get put through the graphics pipeline of Flutter. Right? It's separate, and that's essentially what we would like to achieve here, right? Like, there's no need for it to be handled the same way.
Yeah. So I would really like for Flutter to make that change, but as you pointed out, that's issue number like 30,000. We're now up to issue number 120,000 ish. So unfortunately, that does not seem to be a priority for the Flutter team.
I have the issue. I'll bring it up on screen again. So if anyone wants to help us out, go thumbs up 37180 and get in front of those all important team members.
And if I can make a case to the Flutter team, it would be this. On the one hand, Flutter historically has been largely mobile focused, building Android and iOS apps. These days, it's generally app focused, so apps on one platform or another. But unlike Android and iOS, Flutter does not have any captive audience. So if Flutter doesn't keep earning its users, then Flutter will start to disappear because Apple will, I don't know, give people free MacBooks or something to join their silly developer ranks. So what Flutter could do, as I've tried to start here, is Flutter could become an educational basis for all things UI, visuals, gestures, keyboard input, you name it. It becomes the educational basis, which then creates a pipeline of people learning how to program with Flutter And then they, of course, want to have a career with Flutter. So if the Flutter org builds out some of these very basic graphical tools like shared bitmap memory, like custom shaders, we can open up the educational spigot. But we can only go so far right now, because look at what happens when you paint pixels. Either the people who are painting these pixels can't really explore what they want to explore, or they're going to draw the conclusion that, well, Flutter must not be that amazing because look how slow it is. That's really just a misunderstanding of what's happening, because in practice, you wouldn't paint pixels like this in an app. But from an educational perspective, this is limiting. And if you get rid of these limitations, then we can have high schools and universities use Flutter to teach all their graphics courses and maybe even some of their audio courses if that part gets hooked up. And then they will move right into a Flutter career. And then Flutter has a strong market position that they can. So at that point, Flutter would have a captive educational audience to go up against Android and iOS's captive market audience. And I think Flutter needs some kind of position like that. Otherwise, we're just going to constantly bleed people back to iOS and Android as iOS and Android try to copy Flutter. Those are my thoughts.
I think they're a really good point. I've been doing the same thing with the 3D stuff that I've been working on. 3D is not natively supported in Flutter. It can support it better, but again, it's not a priority for the team. So from my viewpoint is I want to make it a priority. So I'm going to do my engine. We're going to see how far we can get. We can see what the performance is. At that point, then hopefully involve engine changes to improve that performance and get the most we can out of that rendering the pixels.
And let's also mention an idea that you and I have been talking about for years. We were talking about this back in probably 2018, but you and I have said, if the Flutter engine would come in different configurations, because you mentioned Skia earlier. Now, the reason that we don't have, one of the big reasons why we don't have access to all of Skia is because it would make the baseline bundle size of Flutter much larger, because it would include way more of Skia. And when you're shipping an Android app with a list view in it, you don't need the other 90% of Skia. So it's very obvious why on a mobile app, we aren't compiling all that stuff into the engine. The thing is, we're now on desktop. And on desktop, people build apps like Photoshop and Premiere and After Effects and Illustrator and Sketch and Figma.
Movie editing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so all of those possibilities are available to us now conceptually, but they aren't available to us technically, because most of the power of Skia is still hidden from us. So how do we resolve this issue between bundle size and power? Well, what Simon and I have been saying for years is that the Flutter engine could actually have different build configurations, where you build it with just the stuff you need for a mobile app, then you build it for the average desktop app, then you build it for the full-fledged movie editing, compositing, do everything app, and you, the app developer, choose which bundle size and feature set is right for you. But also, because those configurations could be managed by the team, let me also point this out. When you upgrade Flutter, often there are engine changes, and you might notice that it says downloading engine or something like that. What that means is that the Flutter org has actually built a version of the engine, and your local Flutter distribution is actually downloading the pre-built version of the engine, not the framework, not the Dart code, but all these C code and stuff like that. The Flutter team is already distributing an engine configuration. All they have to do is offer 3 or 4, or even just 2, maybe 2 engine configurations. One that's the standard app stuff, and one that's full-fledged Skia for the apps that want it. And then you would just say, like, Flutter engine use super big Skia, and then it would pull down that engine for you. That's what we've been talking about for years.
I'm just going to bring this up on the stream here, hopefully. So this is an example of my Flutter installation. And as you can see, you have a bin directory, and inside that you have cache, and you have artifacts, and here is engine. And then here are all the different variations of the engine that I have installed on my machine. And this is what it uses to compile your app. So when you're targeting, let's say, ARM64 in release mode, it will use this version here. And actually, it's all in here. in this jar file. So if I was to open up this jar file, I'm not sharing my screen, so you're not going to see it, but that's got some binary shared object files in there for the platform. Same goes for like Android. There you go, libflutter.so, 30 megabytes. Now this is 30 megabytes uncompressed. If I was to quickly zip compress that, this is obviously not going to be correct, but it's a good example here of the type of size that this would be on x64, right? 11 meg when distributed. Same goes for all these other ones here. So you know, you got Windows UWP in release mode, and there is their 12 meg for the engine, and these exist in all these different forms. But yeah, what we're saying is, why not have more forms, which are, this is like the base version, then you can have like a full Skia version. And yes, and don't get me wrong, this is not by no means a simple thing, right? Like we can look at it and go, oh, that's simple. But now from the back end,
it's a simple use case.
They have to now have to manage two sets of everything, right? So don't get me wrong, it's a big undertaking, but I think it's worth it. And I think it's a great way of having basic and advanced, if you will. Basic, the stuff, and then you can go for like I want to build a game, so I want all these extra features and all these extra things.
Well, and if they can find some way to generate the Dart bindings for the parts of Skia, they might be able to offload a lot of the difficulty in exposing that. But I have no idea if that's reasonable or not. So yes, it's not simple work for them, but there is a path that if they chose it, would make it very simple for us to choose the appropriate size of the engine to give us the capabilities that we want.
Right. Well, we're going to have a little bit of time. So if you have any last questions, get them in now. Otherwise, we're going to be ending very soon. So let's see if we get anything coming in last minute. What do we actually have here? What's this? I want to introduce Flutter with teacher so that I can draw math and plot functions Matt to show to their students. That's a good idea. Yeah. And processing is used like that as a teaching language, right? So.
And related to that, I also have a package on Pub called Geometry, or maybe Super Geometry, I can't remember, something with geometry in there. And it provides some useful conversions between like degrees and radians and does some plotting stuff there as well. It's not like a full-blown graphing tool or anything, but it makes a lot of the trigonometry that you have to run over and over and over again when you're translating from math to pixels. That package should make that easier for you.
That's something the vector math library didn't have. I'm kind of curious.
You're asking if the vector math library didn't have it?
Yeah, because I mean, I know the vector math library has the radian stuff. I'm just kind of curious if
I have to go look. I mean, first of all, it's possible that the vector math library has increased its API since I wrote the geometry library. Yeah, super declarative geometry. There you go.
There you go. Angle from degrees, angle from radians. Yeah, all that kind of good stuff. Well, that's nice. Cool. Yeah. So I have. I don't want to leave it on this, but I have something I found when I was looking for Flutter processing earlier. I found this package. Where is it? Well, let's type it in. I found that someone else had been doing their own P5. Someone has ported the P5 JS to Dart implementation processing. So someone else has done something similar.
Yeah. See what the versions are on that?
2 months ago.
What was the one before that?
3 years ago.
Yeah. So that's maybe what I've done suddenly spurred this person to care about it again. But that project seemed dead when I started working on Flutter processing.
Well, this has also got a very different mechanism of doing it, which I don't think is maybe as nice as what you've been working on.
I make the best APIs. Ask anybody. My APIs are the best.
So let's see what questions have come in whilst we've been playing for time. Let's see. The load time of your web is so fast. How can you optimize Flutter Web to achieve speed? Compile it for release. So a lot of the time, if you're
whose load time? I don't know what that means. Whose load time?
I think it means the load time of your web is so fast. I think your website, Flutter Processing /SuperDeclarative.com.
I don't know, just a normal web build.
I think a lot of people don't realize, right? Like so a lot of developers don't realize when they're doing Flutter that what they're developing with is not the speed. It will be a lot quicker when you release it because it's compiled code. Whereas when you're developing, it's just in time, it's doing interpreted stuff. It's a lot slower when you're developing. So if you get your development really quick, like high performing, when it's in release, it's super quick. You're not going to see any lag whatsoever. That's what you kind of want to aim for. But yeah, there's other things in web that can also make things. So people like this blows my mind that apps do this as well, and they have done for some time. People will load like a 4K image as a thumbnail, and like you wouldn't do that for a website. You're building a website, you wouldn't put like a 4 megabyte JPEG file as a thumbnail because it would take ages to load, right, and ages to process and display and so on. And these are the common just standard web optimizing techniques that you can bring to doing your Flutter app. Process thumbnails offline, upload those, use those, whatever it might be to achieve speed. The other side of this is if you use Flutter Create now, you'll get a web worker, an improved web worker. The original web worker stuff didn't work quite too good, but the new web worker stuff works better, and that will cache and optimize reloading your main.js file. So that should also help. So
by the way, so not quite related to that, but the back end, or let's see, I'm trying to remember what the exact issue was here. I think the back end for my marketing pages are also written in Dart using Shelf, and they're deployed with Docker. And I kept finding that certain files wouldn't upload, and it was like main.js wouldn't upload. Like, what is going on here? I eventually realized that the git ignore is automatically applied as a Docker ignore, and the git ignore has a double star .js or something, or like any main.js is git ignored. And it was so Docker was like, no, we'll just ignore that file then. And I had to get Kevin Moore to come look at my screen and tell me what the heck was going on, because I could not figure it out.
So that's kind of interesting, because that is one of those, like, you need to know Docker to realize it does that by default. And that would have caught anyone out. There's actually another one, G-Cloud ignore, which takes priority over Docker ignore, which takes priority over Git ignore. So yeah, you can get caught out.
Yeah, it would have been fine if Docker was like, hey, you don't have a Docker ignore file, do you want one? Instead it was like, oh, we're just going to assume your git ignore applies to Docker. Like, why would you assume that? I'm trying to deploy something. I'm deploying a build. You know what I don't commit in Git? My build. So why would you ignore that?
I mean, it depends. Like, other people have different ways of dealing with that, right? I don't know. I'm not even going to go there. So I guess the other side of that is if you did I suppose even if you do a 2-stage scratch pipeline for Docker, you would also be ignoring from your original image, so you wouldn't get into your secondary image. Anyway,
yep.
Right. Well, no more questions have come in. Thank you all for sticking around for so long. It's been a great time. I do like processing and do like the graphic stuff. Are you going to join us again, Matt, sometime? Just a general Q&A, maybe?
I'm sure I will. I'm still building the Flutter Bounty Hunters, so I got to come on here to recruit developers and find funders and get people excited about those projects. In fact, so I plan very soon to release an FFmpeg CLI project written in Dart so that you can actually produce videos using Dart. So maybe you'll have me on to show that off in a week or two.
FlutterBountyHunters.com.
There you go. There's another website built with Flutter, served by Dart.
Right. Well, let's wrap it up here. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you all, everyone, next week. Bye for now.